I don't think I said a proper prayer for weeks. What I did say was, please God, let me keep her. Let me keep my baby girl. And I just kept repeating it. My prayer was not eloquent, but it was straight from my heart. That's the great thing about prayer is Hashem understands all languages, and even the silent prayers that you can't find the words for in the moment, He understands. And I know God answered my prayer because here we are. The doctors had told us her prognosis was a 20% chance of survival to 1 year old, and even then she might have severe disabilities. But she's now 3 years old, and aside from a scar, you'd never know about her condition. She's a happy, healthy little girl who loves to learn and play. And if that is not an answer to prayer, I don't know what is. So this is the first siddur that I ever bought for myself. See here that it says, my first siddur. I'm totally joking. This other one was the one that we bought first. And check it out, it says Nusach Ashkenaz. We are Idod Mizrahi.
As you can see, it says Siddur Bat Zion HaShalem.
Whether you are a born Jew who grew up in a non-observant household or a convert like me who started from scratch, the journey to become a more Torah-observant Jew is tough. And it can be fraught with pitfalls and potential mistakes that one can make. I should know because I made a lot of them. So in this video, I put together some of the things that I wish I knew about prayer when I first converted to Judaism. And we're going to be going over questions like, who is supposed to pray? What prayers do we say? When do we say these prayers? What is prayer and why do we say it? And different kinds of prayer in Judaism. And also we're going to be covering the topic of Jewish prayer books known as siddurim in Hebrew. So let's do it.
So much we did together as seasons go by.
So who says prayers? Men and boys over the age of 13, which is bar mitzvah, and women and girls over the age of 12, which is known as bat mitzvah. So the age of 12 for girls and 13 for boys is the age at which they become obligated in keeping the mitzvot. That's who is required to pray or is obligated, but in most families, including ours, we teach our children from a very young age to pray, to learn certain prayers by heart, to understand the structure of what prayers get said at what times. So, you know, train up a child in the way they should go, right? So we actually just purchased a full-size, like adult siddur for our daughter Tamara. She's 6 years old. And she has that now that she uses every day and she loves it. She feels like a grown-up. She can already read Hebrew. She knows the prayers. It's beautiful and it's amazing and I'm so proud of her.
What the pictures, it has the same thing. It has nice roses and dots.
With like a very nice pattern on it. Floral pattern and then like diamonds. I think we should tell people that this siddur is only in Hebrew, right?
Right. This siddur is only in Hebrew. And
there's no English.
And there's no English. And it only says Hebrew word.
It says here, Ovadia Yosef.
So, Birchat HaShachar is number 1. So, it's all the morning prayers you say. So, I go to Madani until page Vav. So sometimes in books you can have Aleph as a 1. Okay.
In Hebrew we use the alphabet as numbers, right? So you can see here bet is 2. Because Aleph, bet, Gimel. 3 is Gimel. Here we have 3 Gimel.
There's where I always keep my siddur.
The next question is what? So what prayers do we say? And so men and boys over bar mitzvah age are obligated to pray 3 times a day at set times. So there is set times for the prayer. So the morning prayer is called shacharit, and then the afternoon prayer is called mincha, and then you have maariv in the evening. So men are praying 3 times a day, and preferably with a minyan, which is a quorum or a group of 10 men. And then they're also saying the Shema before bedtime. Women and girls over bat mitzvah age are obligated to pray the morning blessings and to do 1 prayer service a day. And this can be of their choosing. They can pick and choose between Shacharit, Mincha, and Maariv, depending on their schedule, whichever one is easiest for them. It's up to them which one they do. And women also need to say the Shema twice a day. So the morning Shema and then the Shema before bedtime as well. In some Orthodox communities, you have the single women, which before they're married, they will participate in all 3 prayer services during the day. And then the last question that I want to answer is, what is prayer? Why do we need to pray? I'm pretty sure that there is many more reasons for why we pray than the reasons I'm going to give you here, but I am just going to keep it brief and I'm going to go over a few reasons. So, what is prayer and why do we do it, and why do we do it in the way that we do it with this set order of the prayers? Prayer in Hebrew is called tefillah, and on the most basic level, it is a mitzvah that was given to us by God to cry out to Him in times of need. And the Rambam writes in his Guide for the Perplexed that the mitzvah to cry out to God in times of distress was given to us so as to reinforce and strengthen our faith that God is totally aware of our every situation and that it is in His power to bring us relief when we serve Him or to bring us grief when we deny Him. And let it not even enter our minds that what befalls us is coincidence or happenstance. It is for the benefit of this realization that we were commanded to pray to Him. These words of the Rambam make it clear that the ultimate purpose of prayer is not merely to have our needs and wishes fulfilled, nor even to be rescued from trouble and danger. On the contrary, the reason that we are sometimes subjected to pain and want is so that we might turn to God in prayer. I got her a snack, so hopefully she'll sit and be happy so I can get this filmed. Okay, so why is there a uniform order to the prayers? Why don't we just use whatever words and language that we feel suit our particular needs or desires in that moment in time? The answer to this question is that we actually do both. So in Hebrew, you actually have 2 different Hebrew words that describe prayer. The other type of prayer, which is known as hitbodedut, is personal prayer. And it's one's individual discourse with Hashem in one's own language and one's own words. The wonderful attribute of personal prayer is that one needs no prescribed text, time, or place to speak to Hashem. Anywhere, except for places expressly forbidden in religious law, such as the bathroom or shower, and any time is opportune for personal prayer. It's rather unfortunate that in English you only have 1 word to describe what in Hebrew or in Judaism is actually 2 different concepts, but that's the way it is. So we have the communal prayer, which is known as tefillah, which is all the prayers that are contained in the Siddur, and then we have hitbodedut, which is personal prayer. In some communities, they do have a big emphasis on doing personal prayers. In our tradition, you should do it as much as you feel the need to do. 5 minutes a day is sufficient, but if one can do it more, that is better. The men of the Great Assembly, who was a body of 120 sages who lived during the time of the Second Temple, they were the ones that wrote the text of the prayers and also designated the times for when we are to pray these prayers. These sages, it says, being men imbued with divine inspiration, realize that the loftier purpose of prayer is to strengthen man's faith and trust in God, and ultimately become closer to God. So, though man's biblical obligation to pray is satisfied simply by crying out, the rabbinic structure of prayer calls for identifying, clarifying, and prioritizing one's needs. In particular, the Shemona Esrei, introduced by the men of the Great Assembly, is a litany of specific requests designed to classify every need. The development of a fixed prayer, moreover, allows the worshiper not only to be aware of his sundry needs, spiritual, dietary, financial, emotional, and so on, but to understand how to respond to them. They must be channeled properly towards service of God, as expressed by King Solomon. In all your activities, know Him. Proverbs 3:6. This is the great contribution of the men of the Great Assembly. The prayers teach men 3 times a day what his needs really are. Instead of focusing on material acquisitions, we are given the opportunity to clearly find and define our true needs. Praying in this way educates and gives dignity to the worshiper, enabling him to achieve his own private redemption. Okay, so that was me doing my very best to explain those basic concepts about prayer in Judaism. And if you have more questions, I would recommend that you speak to a rabbi if you are part of a community. And I'll also leave some links in the description box below that you can go read up more on this topic at your own convenience. And now we are going to talk about siddurim. I am going to show you the one that I use, and I'm also going to show you some other ones that my dear husband brought me from our synagogue, and we're going to be going over the differences between them and how you might go about choosing one for yourself to purchase. Okay, so let's do it. For every person on a journey deeper into their Judaism, whether that person is born Jewish or is a convert like me, there comes a time where it becomes necessary to purchase a prayer book. In Hebrew, a Jewish prayer book is called a Siddur, and these siddurim, or Jewish prayer books, are an essential component to living as an Orthodox Jew. They contain all of the prayers, blessings, and formulas for all the different ceremonies that form the central observances in an Orthodox Jewish life. From the 3 daily prayer services, known as Shacharit, Mincha, and Mariv, to the special blessings and ceremonies of Shabbat, such as candle lighting, Kiddush, and Havdalah. A Siddur serves as an essential guide to Jewish life and is a must in every household that wants to go further in their observance of Torah and mitzvot. But perhaps you've been to a Jewish bookstore or online and you've been completely overwhelmed by the number of options that are available. Hundreds of different volumes to choose from all different traditions, languages, translations, publishers. So up here on this shelf is where I keep my siddurs. I have 2 of them. I have a weekday siddur and also a Shabbat siddur. These are the Arot Sephardic siddurs. And this is the weekday one. Here you just have a handwritten note. This is from my parents-in-law when they gave me the siddur as a gift. New linear Sephardic siddur with English translation. And here is the table of contents. The contents are the prayers upon arising, right here in the beginning. Then you have the morning blessings, and then just other morning things that you do. Putting on tefillin, this would not apply to a woman, neither donning the talit. So if this was a woman-specific siddur, you would not have those sections in here. But this is just a general siddur for anyone to use. So those are there. And then Shacharit starts here, which is the morning prayer service. And it's all this, all the way to here. So this is where the Shacharit ends. And then you have Mincha, which is the afternoon prayer service, and it is all of these components. So, and here you have Arvit, which is the evening prayer service, and it includes all of these, but counting the Omer only applies after Passover, and blessing of the moon is only once a month. And then you have the reading the Shema at bedtime at the end. Then you have the prayers for Rosh Chodesh, and for Hanukkah here, the order for Purim. Blessing of the trees, that's something that only happens once a year. And then you have the marriage service, which is obviously when someone gets married. This 7 blessings has to do with a wedding as well. You have Brit Milah, which is circumcision, and redemption of the firstborn son, otherwise known as Pidyon Haben. I've never actually been to one of those, but that's in there as well. Washing the hands for bread, the blessing over bread, the after blessing for bread, which is also called Birkat Hamazon. You have Birkat Hamazon for women, and this is for women with children that may not have time to do the long form. This version is just a shorter, condensed version of the Birkat Hamazon. Blessings for food, after blessings, other blessings for different things, the traveler's prayer, amelioration of a disturbing dream, taking on an individual fast or a personal fast. And then here you have the order of mourning. So when someone passes, these are prayers that would apply in that situation. Then here you have whenever there's a fast day, there's things that we add to the prayers from this section. You have special recitations for the month of Nisan, which is the month when Passover is. You have verses for people's names, Torah reading for Mondays and Thursdays, Kaddish Yehi Shalama transliterated, so it's written in English but making the Hebrew sounds, and Kaddish Al Yisrael transliterated, and the bibliography. Okay, so when you go shopping for a siddur, whether it's physically and you actually go to a bookstore or online and you're just on a website, you are going to want to pay attention to 4 main things. And the first one is going to be tradition, and tradition is also known as nusach or minhag, and these fall into 3 broad categories. So you have Ashkenaz, Sephardic, and Sfard. And there is a very important distinction between Sephardic and Sephard, and I'm going to explain that a little more in detail as we go. The second thing you want to pay attention to is the language. So siddurim can be purchased in many different languages, but the 2 most common ones you will find are Hebrew only and Hebrew with English translation. The third thing you are going to want to pay attention to is the intended user. So you can buy siddurim that are written specifically for women, and also they make some for children or teens or just a general audience. And the fourth thing is comprehensiveness. So many siddurim you will find have all of the prayers, both weekday and Shabbat, condensed into 1 volume. And some also include Tehillim, which is the Psalms, the Book of Psalms. In the set that I have, you saw that I have a weekday and a Shabbat, so it's a 2-volume set to get me through the week, and then I have a separate book for my Tehillim. So let's talk more about tradition and or nusach. So nusach is basically the way it sounds. It's the melody of the prayer service. So certain prayers in different communities sound differently depending on what kind of community it is. So if it's Ashkenazi, it's gonna sound a certain way. If you go to the synagogue and you listen to the way they conduct the prayers, it's gonna have this sound that is distinctive to that community. Same thing for Sephardic. If you go to Sephardic shul, you're going to find that the way the prayers sound is different, and it's specific to this Sephardic community, and it sounds Sephardic. Where it gets a little bit complicated though is when you go shopping, you're gonna find that you can search it by nusach or minhag or tradition. It's gonna say Ashkenaz, Sephardic, Sephard. But what's important to understand is that a Sephard siddur is actually Ashkenaz, but different. So I went looking into this and I came across this fascinating article on the Chabad website where they talk about the Nusach Sepharad. So it says, here is a fascinating and somewhat confusing aspect, yeah, no kidding, of the Ashkenaz Sephard, I think it's Sephard. If anyone knows in the comments, let me know. Cross-pollination. The traditional liturgy of Ashkenazi Jewry is known as Nusach Ashkenaz, or Ashkenazi Rite. With the rise of the Hasidic movement, many began to incorporate various elements of the Sephardic rite into their prayers, since the Sephardic tradition was favored by the Kabbalists and more in tune with the Kabbalistic meditations behind the prayers. This new Hasidic hybrid came to be known as Nusach Sepharad, or Nusach Arizal, since it conformed to the meditations of the Arizal. Thus, a Nusach Sepharad synagogue is most likely populated by Ashkenazi Hasidim, and Sephardim prefer to refer to their rites or traditions as Idod HaMizrach or Sephardi, with the added I, just to keep things clear. I've created this graphic to help illustrate what I am talking about. So on the left you have the tradition, and then you have on the right you have Nusach. So the Ashkenaz tradition and the subcategory of that being Hasidic, and you have many different Hasidic groups, but if you're Ashkenaz, you're going to want to look for a Nusach Ashkenaz Siddur, and if you are Hasidic, you are going to want to look for a Nusach Sepharad or a Nusach Ha'arizal Siddur. If you're Sephardic, you are going to probably want to look for a Nusach Sephardi or Idot Mizrach Siddur. And if you are Idot Mizrach, you are going to want to look for a Nusach Idot Mizrach Siddur. Okay, now a word of advice for converts or prospective converts. Crystal, I'm thinking of you, and Ronin. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys. The challenge that converts that we face is because we weren't born Jewish, we don't have a Jewish tradition or background to identify which community we would belong to. So my advice to you is figure out where your family is from. Your family, maybe go back 3 or 4 generations and see where your ancestors were from. And the reason that we want to do this is because the culture of where your ancestors lived is probably very similar to the Jewish culture from that same area. In terms of the food that they eat, the clothes that they wear, the way they dress, the language, they're influenced by each other. Because it's similar, you are likely going to feel more comfortable in that community. So if your family is, let's say, Romanian or Ukrainian or Polish or Russian, you are probably going to feel most at home in an Ashkenazi community, using an Ashkenazi Siddur and attending an Ashkenazi synagogue. In my case, my family is actually Romanian, Polish, and American on my dad's side. But my husband, because I actually met my husband before I started the conversion program, I took on his tradition when we got married. This is what happens in Jewish communities. If you have a girl that was raised in a Ashkenazi household and she wants to marry a Sephardic boy, the girl is going to take on the traditions and the customs of the husband's family. I wouldn't say this happens often. People usually tend to marry within their same community, but it does happen occasionally. And actually, friends of ours, the girl was Moroccan and she married a Chabad man. So it does happen, and then what happens in that case is the girl takes on the customs and traditions of the husband, and that's how they live their life and raise their children from that point on. So my word of advice to converts is to find out where your family of origin is from, go back 3 to 4 generations and see where they grew, and if at all possible, try and experience the different Jewish cultures, different synagogues, different communities as much as possible to get a feel for the differences that are out there. This siddur, this is one that my husband brought from our synagogue. The synagogue where we go is Chabad, and this is the siddur that they use. And this is an example of a Nusach Sephard or Nusach Ha'arizal. Here you can see it. Nusach Ha'arizal, and this is a Hebrew-English siddur. The layout of this siddur, even though it is a Hebrew-English siddur, it is the layout is different from the one that I have. Here you can see they have all of the Hebrew text on the right side, all the English translation on the left, whereas mine had more of a, on each page side by side. So it is a little bit different layout-wise. This siddur is more comprehensive than the one that I have, since it contains all the weekday and also Shabbat and festivals. So it has the Shabbat and festival prayers here, as well as certain other prayers for festivals. The other interesting thing about this siddur, this Nusach Ha'arizal siddur, is that the taf, the letter taf in, for example, the word talit is pronounced as a T, as it is in the Sephardic siddurim. When you compare it to an Ashkenazi siddur, for example, you'll see that they pronounce the same letter taf as an S. So that's a dead giveaway that you are looking at an Ashkenazi siddur. So this word here, we pronounce this as shacharit, and it is the name of the morning service, the morning prayer service. But you can see here that they pronounce it as shacharis. So they put the taf as an S. Here they call it, instead of a talit, they call it a talis. This was actually the siddur that I used for quite some time before I got the other ones that I use now. Because I started out attending a Chabad center before I even started the conversion process. So on every Shabbat I would just use the siddurs that they had. So this siddur is where it began for me. It was difficult for me in the beginning because I do not read Hebrew and I didn't understand Hebrew at all in the very beginning. So I could read the English, but I didn't know where they were, like on what page they were. So it was quite some time before I was able to figure out by listening where they were and sort of follow along that way. But yeah, so this is what they use in many Chabad houses or Chabad centers. This is the siddur that they use. It is a Nusach Ha'arizal, so that's that one. So that was Nusach, and I hope I didn't just confuse you more, and I hope I was able to explain that in a understandable way. So the next thing that you're going to want to pay attention to on our list is language. If you are able to read Hebrew fluently, Hebrew is definitely the language that is preferable to conduct the prayers in, but in my case, I don't know Hebrew, so I am stuck with the English until I learn to read Hebrew. It is definitely easier to find siddurim that are only in Hebrew. They're the most widely available, but on the market now you do have various Hebrew-English siddurim that are all different traditions, either Ashkenaz, Sepharad, or Sephardic, or Idot Mizrach. So you can find English Hebrew ones. These do differ a little bit in the layout, so if at all possible, if it matters to you and you want to know the layout of it, I would suggest trying to get a picture of the inside of the book, of the pages. You can contact the company possibly and get them to send you a picture of what the inside looks like if you're shopping online. That is one of my pet peeves a little bit with some of the websites out there, that they only show you the outside of the book and not the inside. So when you go online, depending on which website you are shopping on, the one that I'm on here is called Judaica Place. They're out of the US and they seem to have a very good selection, which is nice. I go to Sephorim up here, this tab, and then I go to Siddurim prayer books. So you can see here they have Idot Mizrach English, which is the first category here. Then they have foreign language Siddurim, Nusach Ari, so that is the same as the Nusach Ha'ari Zal, Siddur Ashkenaz Hebrew, Siddur Ashkenaz with English, Siddur Idot Mizrach Hebrew, Siddur Sepharad Hebrew, and Siddur Sepharad with English. So those are all the different options. You can see they have all different nusach with all different languages. If you are looking for a siddur in a specific foreign language, I would just Google that specific language and siddur and see what you can find. Okay, so moving on to number 3, which is user or intended audience. So you'll find when you go shopping that there is some siddurim that are made specifically for women. I don't know if there's some specifically for men. I haven't come across any, but the women's siddur often has additional prayers or blessings that are specific for a woman that a woman would do in the house, and it excludes things that only men do, such as putting on the tzitzit, putting on the tefillin, and those sorts of things. They also have some that are specifically for children or a younger audience, and those are very nice just because they're geared towards that age group. And just to show you an example of a child's siddur, these were siddurim that my mother-in-law sent the kids from Israel. They have one for boys and one for girls. So these are very cute. It just contains abridged versions of all of the prayers. So this is the morning blessings, and then you have the Shema and different prayers in a format that is appropriate for young children. So it has pictures, the Shema before bedtime. This is the one for girls. Same thing, it just has pictures of girls doing things, saying the blessings, making challah, so there's the blessing for challah. The blessing for candle lighting, Shema before bedtime, And then it also has the Hebrew alphabet with the vowels on the back of it. And number 4, comprehensiveness. Siddurim are available in a few different levels of comprehensiveness. So as I showed you, the set that I have is a 2-volume set, but you can also find other siddurs that are with Shabbat and weekday together, such as in the Chabad siddur that I showed you earlier. And sometimes you can also find siddurim that have the Tehillim in it as well. So the Tehillim is the Psalms. Me, myself, I have a separate book for my Psalms, but it really depends on what your particular needs are. If you are a person that is mostly using your siddur at home, then it's up to you which style you choose. If you are a person that takes your siddur with you in a bag or something, you may want to have one that is not so comprehensive, so it is lighter and easier to transport. Also available are what is known as mini siddurim. And these are siddurim that omit some of the more infrequent prayers, such as the tefillot involving a life cycle event, for example, prayers for a wedding, a new child, mourners, etc. And so these siddurim are actually smaller in size. For example, this one here is only 3.5 inches by 5 inches. So it's just a cute little one. One thing to note though is that these compact or mini siddurim are often only in Hebrew. And by the way, just in case anyone was curious, a machzor is another type of prayer book, but it's specific for the holidays. So various Jewish holidays, you have a prayer book that is specifically for that holiday. I'm not necessarily recommending that you go out and purchase a whole bunch of books. Especially if you're a beginner, you don't want to jump over your head and buy a whole bunch of books where you don't necessarily know what you need. I just wanted you to be aware of the different options that are out there. That's it for this video, guys. I hope it has been helpful to you and not just made you more confused. If you have questions, let me know in the comments box below and I will do my best to answer.